that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it's made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5, North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, happy to be with you at this time. We're going to talk a little bit about the SCOTUS, or the Supreme Court of the United States. If you haven't noticed, you're not hearing much about it anymore. The Kavanaugh confirmation went off as expected. What I mean by that is I'm not saying that there wasn't a great deal of emotional upset, that there weren't demonstrations, that there was not a great deal of hand-wringing and gnashing of teeth and wondering and worrying. The president nominated a qualified nominee and he was confirmed. Period. That's the way it's supposed to work, and that's the way it did work. And those who are opposed to Donald Trump and who are opposed to the idea of America running itself in a manner that is consistent with common sense failed. You'll also notice, you may notice, that there is a name that is now absent from the news. Christine Blasey Ford has disappeared. You haven't heard anything about her. Her and her lying accusations are gone. All of her non-witnesses can now return to their lives, and they won't be bothered anymore by the government or by the media, because the entire episode was simply a setup to see whether or not the Republican Party would fold its tent under intense pressure from a very outspoken small minority. You do not recognize that without the megaphone that the media controls by access to the airwaves, by access to the print media, by access to social media, by access to broadcast streams, you would think they are larger than they are. The problem is they have yelled so many obscene things to the American people through the megaphone that they possess that they are now being discounted. And once they become discounted, their size becomes more apparent. They're not very large. The other thing that we have known for quite some time, that those who are really decidedly left in this country make up about 20% of the nation. The United States is a center-right country, has been for decades. Center-right politically. The issue that we have is that 20% or less of leftists in this country are extremely vocal and extremely animated. High energy people. With high funding, by the way. Some of it doesn't come from within the country, but that's a different story. But based on where we are, this past week compared to the week before that, you would think that the Supreme Court is totally unimportant or doesn't exist, when the only thing that's changed is the man that they so vehemently oppose, Brett M. Kavanaugh, now sits right next to Elena Kagan on the Supreme Court, and he is already hearing cases. So he's confirmed Christine Blasey Ford and Selnick and Rivera and all the people that they wanted to have talk to the FBI, all that's gone now. Let me tell you something else. The left no longer has the stranglehold on the federal judiciary that it once did. What do I mean by that? Well, Trump and the Senate, as of the 11th of October of 2018, they have confirmed 84 federal judges, including Neil Gorsuch and Brett M. Kavanaugh. Wow. 29 circuit judges, 29 circuit judges, 53 district court judges, and Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. That's significant. Because when Donald Trump walked into office, he had more than 100, or about 100, vacancies on the federal bench. More than others had seen. Significantly more than others had seen. But those are gone now. Or going away. 84 through the 11th. And then I see this in the Washington Times, in a report that also came out on the 11th. The Senate confirmed 15 of President Trump's judicial picks Thursday night after GOP's leaders reached a deal with Democrats, clearing about a third of the backlog and closing up shop through Election Day to give senators a chance to campaign. 3 of the judges are for the powerful circuits of appeal, while the other 12 were for district court positions. Many cleared on near party line votes, while others were approved by voice votes. They were the first judicial confirmation since last weekend's vote on Supreme Court Justice Brett M. Kavanaugh. Are you hearing that? So on the 11th, after having confirmed 84 right-leaning, let's make no mistake about that, these are not left-wing people that Donald Trump is putting up for the judiciary. 84 right-leaning jurists have been confirmed as district court judges, as circuit court judges, and as Supreme Court justices. Now, in addition to that, another 15 went through on Thursday the 11th. That's 99 judges that Donald Trump has moved into the federal judiciary in less than 2 years. This is just as much a part of making America great again as cutting taxes. It's just as much of making America great again as trade deals. And why is very simple. Those 99 people that have now been confirmed have lifetime appointments. And they cannot be removed by a vote of the people. Now, they can be impeached. We actually have a congressman, Alcee Hastings, I believe, of Florida, who used to be a federal judge, and he was impeached because he was a scoundrel. He's now a member of the Clown Brown Committee, also known as the Congressional Black Caucus. Somehow I don't think that's a coincidence. But you can remove federal judges. You need to have a reason, and there was plenty of reason to remove Alcee Hastings. But absent that, unless they retire or die, that is where they are. And Trump is actually appointing some rather youngish people to the court. Bodes well for the future of America. More to the point, it undercuts one of the few advantages that leftists had in federal politics. Let's not forget the judges that moved against Trump's travel ban, which was constitutional and finally found that way by the Supreme Court. Those were leftist members of the federal judiciary in Hawaii and Massachusetts primarily. Well, guess what? It's going to become a little bit harder to do that venue shopping when you're starting to look at a solid wall of Trump-selected judges to the court. Guys, understand that what you did in electing Donald Trump was actually put the thought process that goes along with being American back in charge of America. You want people on the court who are going to interpret the laws as they find them, comparing them with the original intent of the Constitution, because it is the original intent of the Constitution that restricts government. And that is what you want. It's because when government was unrestricted by judges who had their own agenda, that's how we ended up with Roe v. Wade. That's how we ended up with the so-called legalization of same-sex marriage, despite the fact that more than 30 states had voted it down. You had a homosexual judge on the circuit court, on the federal circuit court, who basically said that the California proposition was wrong and they couldn't do that. One guy just threw out the votes of millions of people. Donald Trump is going through his efforts to see that you do not have people on the courts who throw out the will of the American people, because that's not the way the American jurisprudence process is supposed to operate. The people are sovereign, the courts are not. And what the people decide, right, wrong, or indifferent, is what we have to deal with. And it's not for the courts to correct the errors of the people. It is for the courts to apply the law to the cases that come before them. Personally, I'm excited by this, because for all the other things that are going on, and rest assured, despite all that you're hearing, and they're trying to gin up the discussion about the blue wave again, they're trying to tell you that Ted Cruz is going to go down in Texas. That's unlikely. They're trying to tell you that Heidi Heitkamp is not in trouble in Montana. She's in a lot of trouble. The Democrats are not going to have an easy time holding on to the number of senators that they currently have. And let's just face it, the American people are unlikely, just because a bunch of mobsters, and that's exactly what they were. It was a mob. It's a mob in D.C. It's been a mob against Donald Trump all since the inauguration. The women's mob, the anti-court mob. If you saw any of the videos with respect to the last few days leading up to the Kavanaugh vote, you actually saw people reciting directions given to them verbatim, like sheep, like lemming, being coached by ostensibly paid activists. We're going to go to so-and-so's office. We're going to go to so-and-so's office. And we're going to go there and demonstrate against them. We're going to go there and demonstrate against them. It got that basic. That's mob mentality. But the problem with the mob mentality is it never seems to make it into the federal courtroom. The problem with the mob mentality for leftists is you're not going to intimidate these people. You're not getting in. You may have seen the footage of people banging on the doors of the Supreme Court. Remember one thing about people banging on the doors of the Supreme Court. Those doors did not open, even if anybody was even there. The Supreme Court is not all that Donald Trump has won. In addition to the Supreme Court, there are another 87 federal judges that he has put on the bench. And there will be more. And there will be, I believe, 1 or 2 more Supreme Court justice openings within the next 6 years. If he is able to move through another 2 Supreme Court justices, the left will simply be devastated, because then they'll have to go back to the one thing they do not want to do. The left does not want to have to convince the American people that their ideas are right. They simply want to sway 1 or 2 unelected officials who can simply overrule the people's will. Hopefully that's not going to happen anytime soon. It's not going to happen anymore. I will be very happy when we get to 2020. Actually, I'm going to be happy on November 7th, I believe. I don't believe there's going to be a blue wave. I think there's going to be a red backlash to the talk of the blue wave. And I do think the Democrats are going to be in greater trouble. The good thing about Democrats being in greater trouble is it means progressives have fewer platforms for political power. And that's all I care about. Shut them down. Make them go to the marketplace of ideas and see if they can sell that weak sauce. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida, Freedom in America, Radio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, another captive and another Trump supporter. This is pretty interesting to me. A U.S. pastor who was being held in Turkey and had been sentenced to 3.5 years, or 3 years and 1.5 months in prison on terrorism charges. Basically, they had alleged and convicted him in Turkey of trying to overthrow the government there. Well, he's now out, but back in September, actually on the 19th of September, while he was still in custody and the issue was still in doubt, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders released this statement on behalf of the administration.
The President has been closely following the ongoing situation in Turkey involving Pastor Andrew Brunson. We've seen no evidence that Pastor Brunson has done anything wrong, and we believe he is a victim of unfair and unjust detention by the government of Turkey. At the President's direction, the Department of Treasury is sanctioning Turkey's Minister of Justice and Minister of Interior, both of whom played leading roles in the arrest and detention of Pastor Brunson. As a result, any property or interest in property of both ministers within U.S. jurisdiction is blocked and U.S. persons are generally prohibited from engaging in transactions with them.
So President Trump, looking at the situation, said we need to do something, and he took action sanctioning members of the government and freezing their assets. Now, some would say that's just grandstanding. That's not going to accomplish anything. Trump is trying to make things look good for his base. You know, all that. The same thing we normally hear. However, this past weekend, CNN reported the following.
This is just into CNN. A Turkish court has now freed the American pastor, Andrew Brunson. He's been at the heart of a diplomatic dispute between Turkey and the United States. Our Ben Wiedemann is in Turkey covering the story. Ben, this has been a big priority for the Trump administration, particularly the Vice President, Mike Pence, and it appears that the Turks have now delivered.
Yes, it's a bit complicated, the verdict. Apparently he was sentenced to 3.1 years in prison, but they subtracted the time he's already served behind bars through other legal maneuvers. At the end of the day, yes, he will be released. We understand that consular officials are already talking about details for him to travel out of the country. The house arrest he was under, the travel ban he was under have been lifted. Andrew Brunson is now a free man. Jim?
Yeah, it's interesting. That is a formula that other countries, Iran, for instance, have used when they've freed Americans, is that they don't say that you're innocent, in effect, but they say you've already served your time.
Yeah, that's right. And it appears that the Turks, what we understood, sort of the atmospherics within the courtroom today, was that the witnesses for the prosecution had contradicted themselves, and it did appear that the prosecution was pulling back, and that some sort of resolution was inevitable, and this resolution took place just moments ago. Jim?
Ben Wiedemann, thanks very much.
That was Saturday, I believe. Well, no, Friday. He was released on Friday. On Saturday, he met with President Donald Trump. Andrew Brunson, the American pastor who had been held for 2 years minimum in Turkey on terrorism charges, of all things, met in the Oval Office with President Trump. And Trump congratulated the pastor repeatedly and thanked Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan for facilitating the release. The guy's home. Not only does he thank President Trump, he prays over President Trump. Here's what Trump had to say. Everybody wanted this to happen. I think we can say this was bipartisan. I think if there was ever a bipartisan effort, this was it, Trump said, speaking of Congress here. And there's actually a picture in this story by NBC News of Brunson on a knee in the White House, resting a hand on Donald Trump's shoulder and praying for him, or praying over him. You know, for those who say Trump is not effective, why is this guy home? For those who say that people should not be grateful, this man who is a pastor is praying and expressing his gratitude over what the president has done. Now, of course, there's a black angle in all this. Contrast this with what happened last November, about a year ago, when the UCLA Bruins basketball team went to China, and a very high-profile freshman, he and two other players, I think they were also freshmen, got themselves sideways with the Japanese government.
LiAngelo Ball released from jail in China. If there's one thing you don't want to do when you travel overseas, is go to jail in another country. UCLA basketball player LiAngelo Ball, brother of LA Laker Lonzo Ball, obviously didn't get that memo. According to reports, LiAngelo Ball and two other freshman players on the team were arrested in Hangzhou, China for shoplifting. The team is scheduled to play Georgia Tech on Friday for their season opener overseas, but obviously these three won't be hitting the court. LiAngelo, Cody Riley, and Jalen Hill have since been released from jail after allegedly stealing from a Louis Vuitton store. But according to the LA Times, there's a long road ahead for these three. According to reports, Chinese authorities are deciding what to do next and whether or not they want to bring formal charges against them. And to top it all off, experts say China has a 99% conviction rate. While all this sounds scary, there's one person who doesn't seem to be breaking a sweat. LiAngelo's dad, LeVar Ball. He told reporters he'll be fine. Everybody's making a big deal. It ain't that big of a deal. Judging by that conviction rate, I might beg to differ. Do you think LiAngelo and his teammates will be let off the hook? Sound off on Twitter using the hashtag BETBreaks.
To give a little bit of the backstory, they were caught on videotape. 3 UCLA basketball players, LiAngelo Ball among them, they were caught on tape shoplifting in multiple stores in a mall in China. Red-handed. Donald Trump actually spoke directly to the president of China, President Xi. And lo and behold, these young men who could have spent multiple years in a Chinese jail, which would have meant their lives would have been on a vastly different trajectory than they were on when they signed on as scholarship athletes at UCLA. Well, they were now in a better position, and China released them. As a matter of fact, LiAngelo Ball actually had the common sense to thank the Trump administration for their efforts to get him out of China.
I'm grateful for this UCLA team that stood strong beside us and made it possible for me to be sitting here in front of you all today. I respect and admire all the hard work that they put in to get us back to the United States. I would also like to thank President Trump and the United States government for the help that they provided as well. I'm grateful to be back home, and I'll never make a mistake like this again.
Okay, he says it was a mistake. I'll go ahead and go with that for him. If you're dumb enough to go shoplifting in a foreign country, it's probably not the first time you've stolen something. I'm just saying. Now, interestingly enough, and this is where the real problem, if you really want to understand how politically irrelevant the black community is in America, after doing this, I can tell you this, had my child been in that type of predicament for whatever reason, and the President of the United States took notice of it to the point where he spoke directly to his counterpart in another country and allowed my child to come home without suffering the consequences that went along with their act, done foolishly or otherwise, I would have the same reaction to Donald Trump that Pastor Brunson, who himself was released from a jail in Turkey, had, which is basically thank you, and if I can meet with you, I just want to pray. I want to do something to let you know the depth of my gratitude. Well, and then you have LeVar Ball.
President Trump lashing out, saying he should have left 3 UCLA players to spend years in a Chinese jail, seemingly because he got his feelings hurt by one player's dad. 2 tweets from the president on this today. He writes, now that the 3 basketball players are out of China and saved from years in jail, LeVar Ball, the father of LiAngelo, is unaccepting of what I did for his son, and that shoplifting is no big deal. I should have left them in jail. And then later he writes shoplifting is a very big deal in China, as it should be. 5 to 10 years in jail, but not to Father LeVar. Should have gotten his son out during my next trip to China instead. China told them why they were released. Very ungrateful. Now, Ball is an outspoken and controversial figure in the sports world. He said this to ESPN when asked about Trump's role in freeing his son and his teammates. Quote, who? What was he over there for? Don't tell me nothing. Everybody wants to make it seem like he helped me out.
We should point out the 2 tweets that you mentioned were hours apart, so now this is something that the president has clearly spent his Sunday thinking about, and others are now also responding. Representative Adam Schiff tweeting this out today about the president, writing, quote, the president would have left American students in a foreign jail because their families didn't lavish sufficient praise on him. How can someone in such a big office be so small?
For those who didn't notice it, yes, that was a CNN report, and you can tell by the tenor and tone. Let me pull out the things about that matter. LeVar Ball is an arrogant, ungrateful SOB. That's who he is. He is just mouth. Remember, we were supposed to have Big Baller Brand selling shoes and merchandise. Well, that flopped. His 3 sons were all supposed to go to UCLA and then go play for the Lakers. And at least, well, that did happen for his oldest son, Lonzo. The other 2 ended up playing in Eastern Europe in some made-up league that he concocted, and they may never see the light of day in the NBA because at the end of the day, they're not that talented, and they have to deal with him and what he brings as baggage. Lonzo barely escaped the negative impact of his father's mouth on his career. And I think the reason he's escaped that is now his father is beset by failures in business and having to try to figure out how to keep his sons from getting themselves beat half to death in Eastern Europe playing basketball. No gratitude. And arrogant about a lack of gratitude. And CNN, of course, is playing to that. And saying, in the words of Schiff, he would have left American students. Now, when we're talking about people being left behind, why is it that no one wants to talk about the fact that our good friend Barack Obama left a Marine behind in a Mexican jail and never even so much as called the president of Mexico? Mexico's a lot closer to the United States than China. But the administration of Barack Obama did nothing for the man, did nothing for him. Can you explain that to me? Where was Adam Schiff then? So you have to think about something. When Americans are in trouble, here is a black and white difference, and forgive me for that terminology, but here is a clear, stark, distinct difference between the last administration and this one. If you are an American in trouble abroad, this administration wants to make sure you get home. When the last administration, it was openly said, well, they shouldn't have gone there, particularly among black folks. They know what's going on if you go over there. That's just too bad. We don't need, because we had folks, I think they got caught in Iran or Iraq. I can't remember which one. I think it was Iran. And not a finger was lifted by the Obama administration to get them out. And the overwhelming response that I remember seeing from black people, at least in social media, is, well, they just should have recognized what it was like, and they shouldn't have gone there. They shouldn't have done this. They shouldn't have. And there was another pastor who was held in Iran for numerous years, finally got out. And the same thing, but the Obama administration didn't care. Not only does the Trump administration care about a pastor left in Turkey, not only does it care about a kid who might have been left in China, he also cared about the remains of Korean veterans, or our veterans of the Korean War, and he's worked with that government to secure the return of their remains. If you want to understand why Donald Trump is president of the United States and Hillary Clinton is not, and why nobody really misses Barack Obama if they have an American mindset, this is a big part of why. America is supposed to mean something, and American citizenship is intended to have its privileges. Donald Trump is restoring what Barack Obama ignored. It's really not much more difficult to understand than that. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Let's just discuss, during this final segment of the first hour, Don Lemon and Kanye West. Let's start. Let me be full disclosure with regard to Kanye West. I don't really care. I'm as ambivalent about Kanye West as I think anyone can be. I don't listen to his music. I couldn't pick his songs out of a lineup. I know what he looks like. I don't think much of him, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. I just don't think about the guy. I understand he's a popular musician, at least with some. I understand he's had some he's had good success in the music industry. I understand he's even branching out into fashion. I get all that. I understand that he's married to Kim Kardashian, and bless his heart for that. But he's of no consequence to me personally. He's just not. I'm aware of some of the things that he's done. He seems he's always been a little bit on the outspoken side and a little bit on the outrageous side. So that's just the way things go with him. We understand who he is. Okay? We get it. He's the same guy who went up, and when Taylor Swift got an award, he went up on the stage and told everybody that she didn't deserve that award, that somebody else, I believe it was Beyonce Knowles, who should have gotten the award. I get all this. I know he's a bit of a loose cannon. I know the stories about how he was before and after his mother passed. He was not as eccentric, or whatever you would want to call it, while his mother was still living. Maybe she was an influence that helped him check some of his eccentricities. I get all that. I just don't care about Kanye West. He's not significant to me. However, he has become very significant to the left-leaning media and to pretty much everybody on the left who demands that all black artists, all people of color who have received any measure of success or notoriety, you must be with us on the left. If not, then we're going to come for you, including the things that they've done to various artists and even larger personalities like Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby is now going to be sentenced to jail after following a trial that was, the best way to put it was, you know what? We didn't build railroads like this when we were trying to link the continent. They railroaded Bill Cosby. And well, he's guilty. I don't know that he's guilty. Guilty of what they accused him of? No. You go back and read the court transcript, and you'd have a hard time doing that if you're objective, finding him guilty. Was Bill Cosby a bad actor in the 1960s and 1970s? Look, I'm not going to try to say what he has admitted to doing is in any way, shape, or form good. But don't come to me 30 years after the fact and then let's do a dog pile on the guy and then try to say what wasn't a big deal before. Now all of a sudden you can't sleep at night because of what happened. I'm not going for that okey doke. Nevertheless, if you are a black performer, a black entertainer, a black athlete, a black anything, and you do not toe the Negro, KNEE-GROW, Democrat progressive, pet of white progressive, party line, ideological perspective, then you will be made a pariah in every conceivable way. However they can come at you, they will come at you. They will call you names. They will tell people not to support you. That's how, if you recall, that's how someone like Jennifer Hudson found herself not performing at the inauguration. And for those who do not recall, after Jennifer Hudson had multiple members of her family murdered, sadly and tragically by another family member, it was Donald Trump who, without being asked, took her and remaining members of her family and put them up in the Trump Hotel in Chicago and provided security for them so they could deal with this more privately. But of course, Donald Trump is a racist. So it was not a surprise to me to learn that Jennifer Hudson would perform or had scheduled or had agreed to perform at the Trump inauguration until the Negroes found out. And they hounded and they pounded, and as a result, she backed out. I understand that as well. I just think it's cowardly, but I understand it. Because it's tough having everyone in your industry against you, particularly if you're not financially independent. And now someone's threatening to cut you off and you don't know where the next gig is going to come from. I get it. I get it. But now we've crossed the line, in my opinion, and gone into talking with some absolute nut job. Well, let's set this up. Kanye West went to the White House. He was there. Jim Brown was actually there as well as others. And he met in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. It was a bit of a random speaking tour, because that's just the way Kanye West is when he's speaking. You have to listen closely, maybe listen more than once, to actually pick out the salient points of what he's saying, and there tend to be salient points, at least from time to time. He did that, and because he's been on a bit of a run where he has embraced Donald Trump, he is wearing the Make America Great Again hat. He is speaking against the Democrat Party, saying that people should not be totally beholden unto the Democrat Party. And for him to say that, for him, because he does have some influence, for him to say that is unacceptable. And CNN, one of the more prolific guardians of Negroes staying on the plantation that the Democrats and progressives have made for them, they came after him on Wolf Blitzer's program, and Don Lemon had something to say regarding Kanye West.
Control me? Oh, that don't stop me. That's an invisible wall. Would you build a trap door that if you mess up and you accidentally something happens, you fall and you end up next to the Unabomber? Let me get this guy a hug right here. I love this guy right here. Yeah. Come here. Yeah.
He did most of the talking in the Oval Office. Don, what did you think?
Wolf, I have no animosity for Kanye West. I'm just going to be honest, and I may get in a lot of trouble for it. I actually feel bad for him. What I saw was a minstrel show today. Him in front of all of these white people, mostly white people, embarrassing himself and embarrassing Americans, but mostly African Americans, because every one of them is sitting either at home or with their phones watching this, cringing. I couldn't even watch it. I had to turn the television off because it was so hard to watch. Him sitting there being used by the President of the United States, the President of the United States exploiting him, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, exploiting someone who needs help, who needs to back away from the cameras, who needs to get off stage, who needs to deal with his issues. And if anyone around him cares about him, the family that he mentioned today, or whomever, his managers, maybe some other people who are in the music business who know him, they need to grab him and snatch him up and get Kanye together, because Kanye needs help. And this has nothing to do with being liberal or conservative. This has to do with honesty. And we have to stop pretending, sitting here on these CNN panels or on whatever network panels, and pretending like this is normal. And let's have this conversation about Kanye West and what he said. Who cares? Why are you sending cameras to the Oval Office for Kanye West? Did you send cameras to the Oval Office and carry it live when Common visited the White House? Common visited the White House and did a beautiful poem, spoken word. It talked about how black people are kings and queens, how we need to rise up and do better. He didn't disparage anybody. He didn't speak in non sequiturs. He didn't do anything awful. And you know, the only people who criticized him, the only people who really covered it, were Sean Hannity and his band of hypocrites who are now who are now applauding Kanye West, the same people that many in that group called the N-word because of Taylor Swift and because of George Bush. And now all of a sudden, he is the person who represents the African-American community. He doesn't. We need to take the cameras away from Kanye and from a lot of this craziness that happens in the White House, because it is not normal, and we need to stop sitting here pretending that it's normal. This was an embarrassment. Kanye's mother is rolling over in her grave. I spoke to one of her friends today, or texted with one of her friends today from Chicago, Donda's friends. I used to live there. I know him. She said Donda would be embarrassed by this. She would be terribly disturbed by this. And Kanye has not been the same since his mother died. He kept talking today about, I put the hat on and the hat made me feel strong, and wearing a cape. He needs a father figure. He needs someone to help him and to guide him. And he needs a hug more than anything. Kanye, back away from the cameras. Go get some help, and then come back.
Let's take some of this piece by piece. Don Lemon criticized Kanye West for having a minstrel show of types and random speaking and actually making people laugh and amusing them and saying things that made him cringe, made Don Lemon cringe, in front of mostly white people at the Oval Office. The rant you just heard from Don Lemon, where he's basically talking about another black man and even invoking the man's dead mother. You want to talk about going way out of bounds. He's doing that in front of a panel of mostly white people. Wolf Blitzer, two other white people, and a black female, or at least one who looked as though she was black. So the difference between what Kanye is doing and what Don Lemon did is what? Oh, the ideology attached to it. Because Kanye is actually on board with the President of the United States and his slogan, "Make America Great Again." Don Lemon, of course, is not down with that. Don Lemon is with the black people. As you heard him talking about, Common visited the White House and it was a beautiful thing. This is the same Common that had a rhyme that said, "Burn a bush because for peace he push no button." So, okay. But he visited the White House during Obama's days, and he gave a beautiful spoken word. He talked about how us black folks need to do better and can rise, and we're kings and queens. Stop. Just stop. Don Lemon, let's be clear. You are a fraud. For you to call yourself black is... Let me get this straight. A white progressive's pet of color who loves his people so much, you love your black people so much, Don Lemon, that you will not procreate with any black person, neither are you even having sex with. You will not procreate or create any more of the people you love in favor of a white man having sex with you. And you're talking about a black man's dead mother. So let me get this straight. You don't mess with black people. You're not in a relationship with a black person. You're doing nothing to perpetuate black people. As a matter of fact, the same racism that you decry is in your bed and in your backside on a regular basis, and you're talking about how embarrassing to black people Kanye West is? Man, get out of here with that foolishness. You're doing that, but Kanye West is messed up in the head? You can't black-splain that. And for one reason, you ain't black in any way, shape, or form. Black people are not traditionally homosexual. It's only until you guys can't get away from white progressives telling you how wonderful it is for the black man to be conquered by another man. Now all of a sudden it's all good, and that's where you are. They ain't black. And your husband, Mr. Lemon, is a white man. Really? Am I the only one that sees this foolishness? Actually, I don't think I am. Because the comedy team of the Hodge twins, the day after Don Lemon went on his little rant, they had something to say in response to Mr. Don Lemon.
I have no animosity for Kanye West. Him in front of all of these white people, mostly white people, embarrassing himself. It's craziness that happens in the White House because it is not normal. Kanye's mother is rolling over in her grave.
Hey, let me talk to Don real quick. Hey, Don, what's up? How's it going? Hey, we ain't got no animosity, all right? Yeah. Hey, man, Kanye West is an American. Yeah. Right? And as an American, he feels like we should support our president. But you don't think it's normal because the president's white. That's the definition of racism there, Don. But hey, on the other hand, you think it's okay to get sodomized by a white man. Yeah, I just went there. Now, there's a lot of black people in the black community that don't agree with what you're doing. But you know what? It makes you happy, right? When that white man is plowing you in your ass. Yeah, you don't listen to him. You live your life. You doing what makes you happy. That's what Kanye's doing, man. What makes you feel good. Yeah, he's doing what makes him feel good. Yeah.
I can't listen to that without laughing. So I'm glad I was off mic when that was playing. It is really hilarious, and they did, in a very direct way, point that out. You want to try to tell another black man how to act when the essence of who you are and the essence of how you behave is tied up with serving a white man. I'm sorry. There's no way to explain this. And the fact that CNN would trot out their minstrel Don Lemon to talk crap about another black man who's more of a real black man than Don Lemon is, and actually to invoke his late mother in the conversation, man, somebody ought to pimp slap that little 5'6" homosexual mixed race wannabe black dude into next week. You're foul for doing that. That's the only word I can think of to describe it. It was foul. And you're a hypocrite. And you are beneath the dignity of being called anything associated with what is truly black. And I'm going to turn this over to my good friend, Ron Edwards, and after that we'll be back with hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
The Republican Party is often described as oppressive, racist, dogmatic, and bigoted, but yet the actual history of the GOP says otherwise. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, it was the Republican Party founded in 1854 in Jackson, Michigan, that abolished slavery. It was Republican Abraham Lincoln who signed the Emancipation Proclamation by executive order to free slaves. Republican-dominated Congress passed the 13th Amendment, ending slavery. It was Republicans who made sure that former slaves received equal protection by passing the 14th Amendment. Unfortunately, Democrats later plundered black Americans, particularly men, through lynchings, the Ku Klux Klan, and Jim Crow bigotry. The 15th Amendment, passed by Republicans, granted black men the right to vote. Democrats in the South didn't like that and often killed black men who tried to vote. In 1957, Republicans passed civil rights legislation and later blocked Democrats from segregating schools. If it were not for Republicans, the Civil Rights Act of 1960 would have remained an idea. And it was the Gipper, Ronald Reagan, who made Martin Luther King Day a national holiday. Learn the truth, and it will set you free. Feel free to join me Fridays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on americamatters.us and shrmedia.com, and Sunday midnights on the Talk America Radio Network. I'm Ron Edwards.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, there has been a second religious liberty sighting, and I'm not talking about in America. We now have one on the opposite side of the Atlantic Ocean. And to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I need to take you back to June of this year when we had the following case that reached the Supreme Court and was decided in favor of religious liberty.
The United States Supreme Court rules in favor of a Lakewood baker, saying he had the right to refuse to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple. That ruling tops our news. I'm Kelly Worthman. The court rules 7-2 in favor of Jack Phillips in the case that started back in 2012. We are covering Colorado first for you this afternoon, and CBS 4 investigator Brian Moss was at the oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court back in December. He's joining us now live from Masterpiece Cake Shop in Lakewood. Good afternoon, Brian.
Kelly, it's a very busy Masterpiece Cake Shop as we take a look inside. Baker Jack Phillips inside right now. I spoke to him just a few minutes ago, and he told me it's a crazy day. The phone ringing off the hook. A lot of people congratulating him, giving him hugs, as you see right now on CBS 4. It was a 59-page opinion with Justice Anthony Kennedy writing the majority opinion. The court siding with Baker Jack Phillips, who owns this shop, and his refusal to craft a cake for a gay couple planning to get married. Phillips, the baker, refused to create a cake for the gay wedding, saying it would be contrary to his religious beliefs. The gay couple, Charlie Craig and Dave Mullins, said they were humiliated by that answer, believing it was discrimination, and that began the court case. In today's ruling, Justice Kennedy, who wrote the ruling, said the Colorado Civil Rights Commission was neither tolerant nor respectful of Phillips' religious beliefs. Phillips' lawyer said he's relieved and delighted with the decision, and the religious hostility has no place in society. At the bakery through the morning, customers showing up to express their support for Phillips and the ruling in his favor.
The gay community needs to be treated with dignity and with respect. Discrimination on all forms is reprehensible. But as you'll note, that the courts said hostility towards religious freedom is inappropriate. Neutrality is the appropriate approach. And for that, I'm glad for the court's ruling.
The ACLU, which represented Craig and Mullins, viewed today's ruling as narrow and based on specific concerns about the actions of the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. Supporters of Craig and Mullins have worried that this kind of a ruling might open the door to more discrimination. But you can see Masterpiece Cake Shop very busy today. A lot of supporters coming in, shaking hands, hugging Jack Phillips, and celebrating his victory at the Supreme Court. Covering Colorado first in Lakewood, Brian Moss, CBS 4 News.
Thank you, Brian.
It took from 2012 through 2018 for that case to be decided correctly. Let me be clear. It's not that the U.S. Supreme Court sided a particular way. They decided correctly. In a nation that was founded upon religious liberty, no one's religious liberty should be infringed by those who are immoral in the practice of their sexual lives. Oh, you're saying homosexuality is immoral. I'm not saying homosexuality is immoral. God says homosexuality is immoral. You can't get through a Bible. If you don't want to believe anything the Bible says, you can call homosexuality anything you want. But you cannot get through a Bible, which is my definition, my understanding of where morality is correctly defined, and get through any part of that thinking that God is in favor or thinks that homosexuality is acceptable. It is not. So for a country that was founded on the ability to worship God according to what is written in the Bible and in accordance with their own conscience, for them to basically object, for that person to object to supporting a homosexual message in his daily work, how can you decide another way? Even though the Colorado Civil Rights Commission wanted to just bludgeon this guy into submission, saying you will honor homosexuality and those who practice it above your belief in God. That's really what he was being asked to do. As simple as that. And they're calling it a narrow decision. 7-2 is narrow. Well, they're only talking about the specific actions of the Civil Rights Commission. That's the only thing that got him into this situation in the first place, was the specific actions of the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. If the Colorado Civil Rights Commission had honestly respected anyone's religious liberty, then you know what? The two gentlemen who wanted to be married would have taken their business elsewhere. They should have taken their business elsewhere. They should not be in the habit of trying to compel people to agree with them. But you have to understand what's really at work when it comes to homosexuality in Western culture. Homosexuality in Western culture is being used as a tool simply to diminish the authority of God in any part of Western society, including here in the United States. Well, in that particular case, it did not prevail. And with Donald Trump putting scores of right-leaning judges into the federal district courts, into the federal courts of appeal, and onto the Supreme Court, where he has put his second nominee. You have Gorsuch and now you have Kavanaugh. It's going to be a little bit harder for homosexuals to use the federal courts to push their agenda of putting God on the back burner, and that God has no place in the public square. Only their idea of what is good is what's available and accessible and appropriate in the public square. What God has to say is hate speech and should not be tolerated. That is their message. Well, that's one point. There's another sighting of religious liberty on the other side of the Atlantic, and it happened in Belfast, Ireland.
It's a victory for those who don't want to be forced what to write, whether in ink or icing. People who only want cake, not words to be put in their mouth, when they don't agree with the customer's message. Gareth Lee is a gay rights campaigner in Northern Ireland, the only part of the UK where equal marriage is still illegal. A Christian-owned bakery rejected his order. He had to take his business elsewhere. But 5 Supreme Court judges decided this was not discrimination.
Their objection was to the message on the cake, and not to the personal characteristics of Mr. Lee or of anyone else with whom he was associated.
2 courts had previously ruled against Asher's Bakery. The £36 cake has now run up legal bills of £500,000.
We always knew we hadn't done anything wrong in turning down this order. After more than 4 years, the Supreme Court has now recognised that, and we're very grateful. Grateful to the judges, and especially grateful to God.
The Supreme Court moved to Belfast for a 2-day hearing on the case earlier in the year. The judges insist the ruling should not diminish from genuine discrimination. But Mr. Lee disagrees.
That made me feel like a second-class citizen, and the judgment today tells me that that's okay.
Back in Belfast, Mr. Lee's fellow campaigners say there are implications way beyond the gay rights issue.
I think there is a fundamental question here as to whether or not a printer printing a particular message is them endorsing that message. The reality is that if you offer a service, you must offer that service to everyone on an equal basis.
At this printing business, they take the view that the customer is always right in what they want written.
It doesn't make you think, if somebody came to me and said, I want a T-shirt that says, I oppose gay marriage, you wouldn't turn that down, even though you get a lot of business from the gay community?
No, I wouldn't.
Because it's business.
It's business, correct.
And you can't afford to turn down business.
Well, yes, correct. That's true too.
It's a sweet victory for the bakers, but leaves a sour taste in the mouths of those who had their cake and ate it. Ian Woods, Sky News, Belfast.
So again, very much like the U.S. Supreme Court decision, you can't make people go along with your ideology. You cannot make them use their business to support your message. Because the cake, we can give you the cake. We can't give you the message. In Jack Phillips' case, it was a little bit, look, my art is in support of my faith. My faith does not recognize homosexual marriage. Therefore, I will not use my art for that. The same thing here. We agree with God, and we will not create a message that goes against what we believe. Now, for the guy saying, well, I'm not going to turn down business, that's fine. You're not someone who's afraid of God. You're not someone who reveres God. You're not someone who respects His word that much. You would rather take money from those who hate God. I'm going to say this again. I say it often, and people want to act like I'm crazy, but if you've ever read the book of Romans, 1st chapter, 30th verse, it is very clear that the word of God considers homosexuals those who hate God. Please explain to me, if I am a person of faith who is running a business, why I would want to do business with someone who's asking me to agree with their hatred of the one in whom my faith is placed. That is crazy. You want a cake? I'll make you a cake. You want a t-shirt? I'll make you a t-shirt. Do you make it for gays? Homosexuals? Sure, I'll make you a homosexual. I'll make you a t-shirt that a homosexual can wear. I'll make you a cake that a homosexual can eat. Am I going to put on it anything that indicates that I'm in agreement with what you do or say that is against God? The answer is no. The answer is no. And I'd rather not take your business than offend my God. That's the long and the short of this, to be honest with you. It doesn't go any further than that. It doesn't go any more than that. And that is what this country was founded upon. I can't speak to what the UK was founded upon. I'm not a Brit. But to tell somebody in America that they must act in accordance, contrary to conscience on matters of religious faith is simply wrong. Well, we have to eliminate discrimination. You know what? No, you don't. You do not eliminate discrimination at the cost of diminishing religious liberty. You just don't do that. And now we have two rulings, one on this side of the Atlantic, one on the other side of the Atlantic, that is saying essentially the same thing, even though it still reaches back and tries to find a way to coddle those who are homosexual. Oh, by the way, it's not all goodness and light. The Fox Denver affiliate filed this report regarding Jack Phillips 4 months after his Supreme Court win.
Sued Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper and state civil rights officials, claiming Colorado has renewed its religious persecution in an investigation despite the Supreme Court decision.
Yeah, Joe St. George joins us on the phone, our political reporter here at Fox 31, with more on this lawsuit, Joe, and the years-long saga that's been going on with this cake shop. What is new today?
Well, the new thing is that really here we go again, Kirk and Megan. This time it's not about a gay wedding cake. It's about a transgender transitioning celebration cake in which Jack Phillips refused to make. This goes back to 2017. And in short, this was, to some degree, we expected Mr. Phillips to be challenged again in some capacity because the Supreme Court ruling was so narrow when it came out a few months ago. It didn't say that Jack had complete authority to do really whatever he wanted. It basically said, when it came out, the Supreme Court thought the Colorado Civil Rights Commission in that one instance several years ago was discriminatory. This is a different instance, and now we see what is happening. We see the state of Colorado believing that he must serve a protected class, transgender individuals, and Jack Phillips disagreeing this morning, guys.
So, Joe, I mean, is this a situation where someone was legitimately requesting a transgender cake, or is it someone who was picking a fight, for lack of better words?
Well, with the Alliance Defending Freedom as the attorneys that's been representing Jack, and they have not named whoever was it, but they did say in their release this morning that it was a lawyer, an attorney. Now, that doesn't mean this was meant for it to be the next legal challenge, but it is interesting that they did label it an attorney, and we'll find out more throughout the day. We have been speaking with Jack Phillips' legal team, and they said they do anticipate to make him available for us, so we're hoping to have that for our later newscast today. But again, just reading through this again, it broke in the last few hours here. This is what Jack said to the state. He said he contends that he will not support a message that, quote, promotes the idea that a person's sex is anything other than an immutable God-given biological reality. So Jack's faith, here we go again, right? Deja vu, here we go again. Jack's faith doesn't really believe in the transgender process. As a result, he doesn't want to support this the same way his faith doesn't believe in same-sex marriage.
Simple translation. The ungodly will come after the godly repeatedly until the godly have the courage to stand up and say no. That is not discrimination. That is basically, we will not put you above God. Now trust me, there are people who are of Christian faith who really don't have a problem, or at least they say they're of the Christian faith, who really don't have a problem serving the homosexual community. They don't care. They don't think it's a big deal. Maybe they think it's an opportunity for them to, quote unquote, share their faith with them and maybe encourage them to think differently. Maybe that's what they think. Nevertheless, if you're going to live in a free country and you cannot decide with whom you do business, for any reason, to be honest with you, well, now you're opening up racial discrimination. I really don't care. I'm going to be honest with you and say I really don't care. If the reason someone does not want to do business with someone else has to do with ethnicity, then in a country where you really want to have individual liberty, you need to tell the person looking for service to find someone else. The idea in 2018 in America that one person looking for a service that is turned down by one business can't find it at another business is ludicrous. And the idea that everybody needs to bend over and submit themselves to the will of a leftist mob promoting the agenda of acceptance of what was just several decades ago a recognized mental illness is also ludicrous. Now, if you think they're going to come after him in the United States, and you've already shown in the state of Colorado they are coming after him again, know that those bakers in Belfast, Ireland, are definitely going to be challenged on their faith once again. Here's what I would tell those who continue to try to push homosexuality over and past the Word of God. Don't wake God up. Not to say that he's sleeping on this issue, but don't make this rise to him to the point where he feels that it's time for him to do something about it directly. Don't do that. It would be better if you sought peaceful coexistence rather than the submission of God's people to your will. Do what you wish, but I wouldn't recommend that if I were you. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, we are coming up on the 2-year anniversary and the midterm elections that will go along with that concerning the election of Donald John Trump as President of the United States. For those who do not recall, it is one of the most improbable victories, at least from a media perspective, that almost anyone can remember. This actually, in my view, kind of pales the headline that was put out in 1948 that said Dewey beats Truman, and then, of course, Harry Truman did win his second term, because an incumbent president always has a chance. Maybe not a great chance, but a chance. However, in the case of the 2016 election, in which Hillary Rodham Clinton, who had been part of the previous administration, was now running and being endorsed abroad as the most qualified person to ever run for president, who was going to be the first woman president. This is, of course, coming after having the first black, and I put black in air quotes because Barack Obama was anything but that. But after having the first black president, then, of course, the Democrat Party was going to continue to be the party of first by seeing the first woman president elected with a D after her name. All this was going in, and Donald Trump was given absolutely zero chance by the media and the political punditry to win. I don't recall anyone except Ann Coulter stepped out on Bill Maher's show and actually said that of the Republicans who could win, who were running, Donald Trump had the best chance to win. And we were all poised on our election night, having cast our votes, those who did vote, and looking for the results, those who could stand to watch, fully expecting, based on what we had been told, that Hillary Clinton would somehow finally become President of the United States. And we bristled, we braced against it. But actually the process, when you look back on it, kind of went something like this.
Donald Trump, just last week, he confirmed to the National Review that he is again considering a run in 2016.
Do it. Do it. Look at me. Do it. I will personally write you a campaign check now on behalf of this country, which does not want you to be president, but which badly wants you to run.
Which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones right now, Donald Trump.
President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States! Exclamation point at real Donald Trump. Well, at real Donald Trump, at least I will go down as a president.
So right now we have Hillary's about a 75 or an 80% favorite. We have different versions of the forecast you can look at.
Poll has Hillary Clinton up by double digits nationally, 12 points, 50-38, four-way race.
Clinton leading in Florida, Clinton leading in North Carolina, Clinton leading in Ohio, Clinton leading in Nevada. I could go on and on and on.
I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president.
And so, right now, Mr. Trump, to answer your call for political honesty, I just want to say, you're not going to be president, all right? It's been fun. It's been great. I love you. But come on, buddy.
We have a major projection right now. Donald Trump will take Ohio. CNN projects Donald Trump will carry the state of Florida. Huge win for Donald Trump. Donald Trump, we project, will win in Kentucky, in Indiana, with its 11th electoral vote. West Virginia, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Mississippi, South Carolina, Alabama, North Dakota, with its 3 electoral votes, and South Dakota, Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, the state of Montana, North Carolina, Georgia, Iowa, Utah, Wisconsin, Arizona, Kansas, with its 6 electoral votes, Nebraska with its 5 electoral votes, and Wyoming with its 3 electoral votes.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Complicated business.
Thank you, everybody. We are not going to be taking any questions. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
They had everything going their way. They had everything set up. The reception hall in New York was full of celebrating people. It was taken as a given that there was no way that Hillary Clinton could lose to someone like Donald Trump, and though it was a 4-way race, the other 2 candidates, I believe it was Gary Johnson and Jill, I can't remember her last name, were not even considered credible. They just happened to be on the ballot. And Donald Trump shocked everyone but the electorate, because they're the ones who selected him, by winning the election. You know, ever since then, we have had a steady stream of excuses and explanations, a whole lot of woman-splaining from Hillary Clinton as to, well, you know, I lost the election, but I carried so much, but, you know, the people who voted for everything she can to try to diminish his accomplishment, which was actually winning the election, while trying to paint her results in the best light, even though she lost. And not surprisingly, we now have from Democrats and progressives across the board the idea that we should actually become what the founders determined from the outset we should never be, which is a democracy. In other words, what the progressives want is for California, Massachusetts, and New York, and I guess to some extent Illinois, to determine the presidency every year. And it doesn't matter what the other 46 states in the Union decide, they're irrelevant. Because democracy. The founders, of course, saw through that and said, we're not going to do that. We are going to make it so that you actually have to appeal to all of America if you want to be the president of the United States of America. Well, Donald Trump appealed to all of America. Did he win? Well, yes, he won. He won according to the rules that had been in place since 1789. Hillary Clinton knew those rules. She lost. And she's been explaining her loss ever since. Other Democrats have also, to a lesser extent, sought to explain her loss and their support of her, though she lost, ever since that night. And the problem with their explanation is, well, the U.S. economy. The U.S. economy is producing more jobs than there are people available to fill them. The U.S. economy is growing at a rate at least half again as much as it did on average for the entire term of Barack Obama. People are working. Wages are going up. Not only do you have more jobs, you have very low unemployment. You have historically low unemployment. As a matter of fact, for blacks and Hispanics this year, unemployment hit a record low. Had never been recorded at a lower rate since they started recording unemployment numbers. All this is happening when Hillary lost. And the Supreme Court is moving in a direction. All this is going in a certain direction, and that is against the idea that Hillary was ever anything other than a flawed candidate. Nonetheless, she's had book tours. She's been speaking all over the world. She turns up like a bad penny everywhere. She simply does. And in keeping with her current trajectory, she has decided, along with her sexual predator husband, to now do a tour where they once again explain what happened in 2016.
If you're looking to get up and close and personal with Bill and Hillary Clinton, you're in luck. The Clintons announcing today they're going on a North American tour. They'll visit 4 cities the rest of this year and 9 more in 2019. The event is dubbed, quote, an evening with President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton. Dana, you buying a ticket?
Gotta go to bed early that night and every night. Look, I think that these will sell out. People are going to want to see them. Remember, she did win the popular vote, and he's still popular amongst people. But if you go out, if you leave your bubble and you go out to the country and you want to, I'm all for it. It's a great way for them to be out and about, out together. It's a fun thing to do as a couple. Yeah, Peter and I will be coming to a city near you with the dog. Big seller, the dog.
So but the thing is, Jesse, I think Bill Clinton has not been having a good time. I mean, you even see ads run by Democrats, anti-Kavanaugh ads, and they got Clinton in them. So I'm just wondering, this is quite a moment.
Yeah, it's a Me Too boomerang for good old Bill. And Hillary's kind of branded as a loser. Remember, she lost big time. And a lot of Democrats are kind of angry at her for whiffing so hard and letting Trump be president. She was a terrible candidate. But if you look at the Clintons over here and then the Obamas over here, you have 2 former presidents and first ladies who are extremely political active still and extremely partisan. They're not these elder statesmen. They're both there in the trenches throwing hand grenades. And it does suck up a lot of oxygen for presidential candidates. And it makes the Democratic Party look like the party of the past, where the Democratic Party traditionally has been branded as the party of the future. So it's not a good look for them right now.
And by the way, Dagan, there's a Broadway play coming next year about the Clintons.
Oh, goody, goody, goody. Something to put on my calendar. So I think that Bill and Hillary's wedding anniversary is this Thursday. They will have been married 43 years. Oh. And I think that she should go on the road and at one of these events, let him have it. Lose her mind and go after him for everything that he did.
I'd buy a ticket for that.
Right. You know what? That would be, they should pay-per-view that. That would be a 5 or 6 million pay-per-view.
Bigger than McGregor.
To go after him and let him have, I put up with all of this, all that philandering all those years. You couldn't even get me in the White House, and I lost to that man? Please, that would be awesome.
That man? What's such language, Dagan? That man? What do you think, Gregor?
I haven't checked, but I think the Clinton tour is not going to Wisconsin. About this, she's thinking as she's doing the tour, this will pay for the renovation in the second house, and he's thinking, how am I going to score groupies with her around? I don't know.
How much money do they really need?
He's only going to the states where there's a Hooters and a local but heavily frequented rest stop.
By the way, so Michelle Obama is also going out, and her ticket prices are even higher than the Hillary Clinton ticket prices.
One of the most popular people in America,
and she's in much bigger venues. I think that she's in some like 15,000 seat.
Not bigger than Trump venues, Dagan. Come on now, huge crowds.
Dagan, you got to get in tune with this crowd here. This is Trump land here.
The tickets were listed as costing anywhere from $59.50 up to $745.50 on Ticketmaster for an evening with President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton. The interesting thing to me is she doesn't even get top billing, but I guess that's appropriate since she never made it to the presidency, and of course Bill did. The brazenness of this just is astonishing to me. These are 2 of the most despised individuals in these United States. I'm not talking about whether or not people want to support her or them politically. I don't think either one of them could run for dog catcher in Erie, Pennsylvania and do very well. I don't think they could run for dog catcher in New York City and do well. They are heinous individuals, and they keep displaying themselves and proving themselves as such. Nevertheless, despite all the negativity, that is associated with them, despite all the dirt that has been done by and in their name. They have the unmitigated gall to go on tour and say, pay me. You have to admire the absolute, unadulterated chutzpah that this requires. As a result, I can't hate, but do know this, I have something much better to do with anywhere from $60 to $750 than to go spend my time listening to people that I wish had never entered the national American political scene. I really wish they never had. The country would be in a different state, arguably a better state, had we never heard the name Bill and Hillary Clinton in American national politics. But now we can't get rid of them. We cannot get rid of these two people. So, for those who are so inclined, they're coming to it's a tour of 13 cities, 4 this year, 9 next year. And it will have the pair sharing stories and inspiring anecdotes and discussing issues of the day and looking towards the future as though they actually have one in American politics. You can't make this stuff up, folks. Well, for those who are inclined, get the schedule, get your ticket. For the rest of us, we'll be going to the polls in November. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin' will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. There is this issue that keeps coming up, particularly in social media discussions or any other discussions where people are unmasked enough to say close to what they feel, even if they overstate certain things that are in their minds. I call it the damage left undone. While America is actually doing some efforts, making some efforts at repair, a lot of political repair, since 2009, putting more and more Democrats out of office at the state and federal level. Now we are seeing changes in the courts as a result of the most recent general election. We are definitely seeing a return to a state where God can actually be mentioned in conversation without it immediately being shut down. These are all positive things. There is some damage, though, and I must also mention that we are making some inroads again on, well, I guess you could say putting up a firewall against the influence of homosexuality upon the culture. Not as much as should be, but there's some signs that that is going in a better direction. But there is some damage that is still left undone, and it is much more pernicious than anything else that there is. And it is specifically the lack of respect that men in Western society, in particular here in America, receive from women. It's kind of like a little whining sound. Maybe if we go back a century ago or further, when, before even women had the vote in the United States, and it was just a sound, just kept, pushing men and irritating. And it was something that men believed they could manage, and now it is managing them. By the time you got to the late 1960s and you had feminism and the sexual revolution, what men actually did not understand or did not embrace or did not think through was that having any support or expressing any sympathy toward either of those two movements would do the damage that it has done to the American family and to American children. What's the damage to the American family is that you no longer have traditional marriages at anywhere near the rate that you once did, and they don't hold together very well. And the reason why is women do not respect men. For them, the love that they should get is unconditional, but the respect that they should give to men is conditional. They have no problem going into certain scriptures and talking about how a husband or a man is to love his wife as Christ loved the church. However, they forget that before we talk about what the man is responsible for, the woman is told to revere her own husband. They're not willing to do that. And it's that double standard which is kind of goes along with the way the female mind seems to work from time to time. And now what you have is, if you don't love me the way I want you to love me in spite of all my flaws, and I should never have to change because you're just supposed to love me unconditionally, unless you're willing to do that as a man, then women believe that any respect for you is optional. Not to mention there are other conditions that go along with it. You have to be someone who always does the things with which they agree. Otherwise, you are not worthy of respect. You always have to make a certain amount of money. If you don't make the right amount of money and you're not able to do things at the level financially that they believe you should, then for some reason you are not worthy of respect. That's just the way things are. Now, is it that way with every female? No. But it is that way with far too many. That is why you have the divorce rate that you have. That is why you have the illegitimacy rates that you see in almost all communities except Asian communities. And the rates, of course, among blacks is unconscionable. 77% bastard baby rate. So we need to recognize and stop putting women in the forefront, because we've been putting women at the forefront of some of these discussions since the late 1960s and the 1970s. And the result has been a decline in the family. The result has been more than 55 million children murdered in the womb. And we need to actually get to the point where men say to women, and are not willing to back down from it, no, you're wrong. For example, when you bring up the issue of abortion, I make it very clear. Well, in this country, and throughout much of the West and other places as well, a man has really no say, no control over whether a woman becomes or remains pregnant, because she doesn't need his permission to be on any particular form of contraception, and neither does she need his permission to kill a child in the womb should contraception fail. He has no say in that. These are just the facts, yet women will consistently try to say, well, it takes two. No, it doesn't. It only takes two to have sex. But she controls procreation unilaterally. That's a disrespect to men. It is basically telling every man that he is, well, you're optional. You're really not that important. And as a result of women doing that, our society has problems. We have called the single mother a hero. The single mother is not a hero. The widowed woman who is a single mother is a hero. The woman who simply decides to have sex out of wedlock and gets caught and decides to have a baby, she's nobody's hero. She is selfish. Well, what about the man? Well, when men can get pregnant, the selfishness will be shared. But remember, he has no control over this. If he did, it would be better. And because he does not, families are very weak in the United States compared to where they were 6 decades ago. Children, as I said, 55 million children have been destroyed in the womb, the one place where children should be safest. And this lack of respect for men is basically threatening the viability of the culture. Let me make sure we understand this. There is not now, has never been, nor is there ever likely to be a dominant culture on the planet that is led by women. It's not going to happen. And there are reasons for that. It is because men and women are different. They are made to complement, where a lot of women think they are made to compete. There is a way to fix this. And the problem with that is that the majority of people that I know have a problem with the solution. The solution, to be honest, is a retreat from certain aspects of modernism, because what some people call progress has taken us into an area of almost absolute barbarism, particularly in the black community. If you go into the urban areas in the black community where you do not have nuclear families, where it's always baby mama and baby daddy, where you are teaching children that the only reason that they are here is their mother decided that they did not want to have an abortion after she got pregnant, or the reason that they're here is because it actually affected the amount of money coming into the household on a monthly basis because they were born. So you're a meal ticket. You're not a gift from God. You're not someone to be protected and raised. You are someone to be exploited. And if you can't be exploited, your birth is optional. If you think this message doesn't penetrate and get through to kids, it doesn't get through to children when they don't see mom and dad in the same house, when they're not raised by their fathers. 3 out of 4 people, particularly males, who end up incarcerated have one thing in common, and it cuts across all races and all classes. Where was dad? And in a culture that now seeks to lionize women who have children without men, or let me say it differently, who seek to raise children without men, or seek to control men by using the family court system to block a man's access to and control of his own children, well, there is your problem. This is something that's going to have to change. The only way it's going to change, you can find this in the words of Jeremiah 6:16. Stand in the crossways and look and seek the old paths, and there you will not find more money for your pocketbook. You will not find higher education for yourself or your loved ones, but you will find rest for your souls. It is the soul in America that is in torment. It is that where people cannot figure out, where do I go just to be able to get through things without causing problems. Oh no, now we have to have 57 genders? How does that work? We have to, marriage is any two critters that want to get together. We've already gone to homosexual marriage. Pedophile marriage is not far behind. That's even being lobbied for, and there's a growing amount of support for that needs to be beaten back. You will soon find people wanting to marry animals because they're easier to get along with. They don't talk back. The only way to get out of this stuff is actually a return to traditional morality, which means whether you want to go to church every week or not, it means a return to Scripture, the Holy Bible, as the moral blueprint for society. That does mean that certain things that go on now would not be acceptable, would not be, let me just say acceptable. It's not a matter of not tolerated, because you've always had the same type of deviancy and sin and everything else. That's not going anywhere. But the idea that it should have a level of acceptance anywhere near what it has achieved in our day and time, that is the problem. The only way to solve that problem is to step up, beat it back, respect men, love women, and as a result, nurture children. It means marriage where the man is the head of the house, the woman is his help, and the children are the fruit of their relationship, intended to come up and to emulate what they've seen from their parents. If you do that, making America great again is a matter of course. If you do not, it will be your fight until you change your mind. And that's our show. God bless you. God keep you. And until next week, do take care.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.